welcome to what I believe is the first panel in the event. So a warm welcome. Thank you very much for attending. We have a very exciting panel here this morning to kick things off. Then I'll let them introduce themselves one by one. Red One, do you want to
Yes, thank you. Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Red One. I'm the Executive Director of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. We are a trade organization, non-profit for promoting Ethereum adoption to large enterprise. We've been around since 2017, and we focus on really education, supporting the growth of Ethereum to large enterprise, and also standard work.
And I'm Daniela. I'm the Executive Director of the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. For those of you who don't know the Linux Foundation, for the last 25 plus years, we've been the home for what I would say the most important open source projects. Basically, most of the technology that you've touched today on your way here is hosted at the Linux Foundation. 10 years ago, we started a blockchain project. At the time, it was called Hyperledger. Today, it's called Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. And we have over 17 projects that we now host. And the importance of open source and open development is really critical to this industry. I'm very pleased to be here at Sibos today. Thank you for inviting us and having us here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Liz Shadis. I'm based in New York with Citibank. I manage our partnership and innovation activities across our service and organization.
Hi everyone, my name is Tony McLaughlin. I spent 30 years in traditional finance, and then I had an epiphany and decided to work on public blockchains. So nice to be here.
Okay, so we have a very broad panel, I think, in terms of experience and opinions in this space. I should introduce myself properly as well. So Adi Ben-Ari, founder and CEO of a company called Applied Blockchain. We've been building blockchain solutions for about 10 years now. I was working for Lloyd's Banking Group before I started the company. So we've had a range of experience ourselves in over the technology and different applications in the space over this period. We've developed and launched a platform called Silent Data, which is a layer 2 Ethereum blockchain that has privacy, which we believe is needed for banking and for financial applications. Right, to kick off the panel, I think we'll do a bit of scene setting. So, Tony, please.
Yeah, so I was asked to try to frame this question about public permissionless versus private permission ledgers. And I like to go back to first principles on things and think about what problem are we trying to solve in financial services. And if you really take a step back, every financial institution, every one of you is a balance sheet. And one of the core functions that you perform is record keeping. Just for your own institution, just to keep track of your own assets and liabilities. So there's record keeping within your own firm. And then your customers want to do transactions that involve other firms. And all of those transactions boil down to the movement of assets and liabilities between these different balance sheets. So the simple question is, how do we achieve it? What's the best way to do the record keeping within our own firms? And what's the best way to do the record keeping across the firms? So in today's world, the dominant paradigm is messaging. We're at Sibos, where we send each other structured emails. Swift is a structured email service, secure structured email service.
Yep.
So one way of running the railroad is we have our own balance sheets, our own record keeping, and we send each other emails. But blockchains present a different way of doing the record keeping. So that's the question. What's the best way of running the railroad? Do we stick with the messaging paradigm? Do we use private blockchains or do we use public blockchains? Discuss.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you, Tony. Liz, you want to tell us a little bit about how the bank has approached this, like this from the start?
Sure. Thanks for setting the stage, Tony. When I look at private versus permission, irrespective of blockchain, network, messaging. To me, public reflects a little bit actually what Discover Stage is about. You use networks to find information. You use networks to find participants. And think about our habits when you use the open internet to search for direction. When you go on the other side, right, when you're on the private space, that's where you're in a space of what I call trust and comfort. Because in some manner or form, either the information has been restricted because the data is confidential, or there's some privileged matter of it that you're dealing with that you don't want to kind of necessarily have the rest of the ecosystem see, or you're really more comfortable there because it's a known set of participants, and what you're transacting it or what you're sharing with, whether it's a trusted messaging system like Swift, it's meant only for another specific person to see. Right. So in somewhere in there, as you get more comfortable with the ecosystem of participants or what you're messaging back and forth, and you need to discover either more information or more participants, you start moving into the more public space. And that's where, this whole middle ground of public permission space starts to come in. So that's where I think, so if you're looking for generic information, participants, you're looking at things that you have, a little more comfort with, for example, you want to share your pictures there, you start in the public space. But as you kind of start looking more at risk, comfort, privacy, you're in the private space. So I think it's a sign of maturity as well as business model. So when we are doing business bilaterally and our clients are with confidentiality, we're in the private space. So I think you start to see both the ecosystems merge towards each other. So as you mature with what you do, who you do with, you start getting more into the middle ground.
Can I ask you, what's the attraction of the public ledgers? Because if you're in a private space and you can do what you need to do,
So Avi, think about information dissemination, right? Today, if you want information on where any stock is trading, it's kind of in the public ecosystem. It's available to everyone. If you want information about a particular stock print or where a transaction happened and who those participants are, you won't find that in the public ecosystem. So these things can exist on top of each other. You can actually operate on a public ecosystem. You can carve out little more comfort zones within those public ecosystems. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't see it being different technologies or networks. You take this existing network and you can carve out more comfort zones. So you could take a public ecosystem and create little more permission spaces in there.
Very thank you. Daniela, your perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? It's public infrastructure and the value that public infrastructure brings to the table. I was looking at when was the first time a bank actually did something on public blockchain? It was in 2017, BBVA in Spain did, and they had a permissioned DLT, I think it was Hyperledger Fabric at the time, and they originated a loan and recorded it on the Ethereum blockchain. And that was in 2017, which was pretty crazy. I was in the room very often with the banks, and we would walk in a room and we would talk about Ethereum or Solidity, and there was always this, no, we don't talk about public blockchains in this room, right, in this executive meeting. But very often all the developers, and we at Linux Foundation, we're a developer ecosystem, the developers were in the room and they were like, please talk about the value of public blockchains, talk about Solidity and other platforms as well. So I think very early on at Linux Foundation, we wanted to be the home for the training wheels for people to build on blockchain. And, as you can imagine, first of all, there wasn't enough engineers and knowledge in the marketplace to be able to leverage these technologies. Second, there's certainly no regulatory clarity. There's a little bit more, but still not 100% with what the banks need. So ultimately, the convergence, and I say this all the time, you had my crypto bros on one side, and you had my executives on the other side. And if I had taken a guess when I joined in 2017, I would say that the enterprise was going to move this way, closer to the public side. But what we're also seeing with a lot of these layer 2s and privacy subnets is that the public permissionless ecosystem is also moving to the center. Why? Because the use cases and the requirements for financial services, for banks, for other privacy requirements is that it needs to converge together. And then to answer your question, why public blockchain? People want the access to the liquidity, right? You can't, many of the networks in the consortium-based systems that we're trying it was expensive to run all this node and infrastructure, so public infrastructure becomes key. And then second is the ability to have liquidity across these ecosystems. And without public chains and rails, you're not going to be able to achieve that.
Redwan, you're a token crypto bro.
Yeah, I guess I am the crypto bro. I'm wearing the colorful jacket of the people, so we can make sure. But this is very, very interesting. I think maybe to frame a little bit the question around like public-private chain, without going too much into details, I think the question that lies is about what is the neutrality of your infrastructure, what's the resilience, and what access of liquidity you can get. Because you can create your private chain or private ecosystem, but then to take Tony's example about the balance sheet and that balance sheet that you can move around different silos and where you can actually make more money, you break that chain. And so you add more intermediate, and so you reproduce the already existing silo. If you want to make more money using blockchain, because at the end, we're here for that, to optimize, those different financial flows. You want to have access to liquidity, and you also want to make those assets floating quickly in a compliant way. We're not some savage. We know you have some requirements and compliance, and we have tools for that. But the more you build on public infrastructure, the less you're also reliable on someone else operating the networks. Because I will put one number. Ethereum has been around for 10 years. They've done 16 upgrades. They moved from proof of work to proof of stake, meaning you used to have to turn very consuming servers, to now you have some smaller machine where you have to put some money at stake. They did that without any interruption. It's 100% uptime. And so the fact those are also team completely distributed. They're developing at any given time 5 different versions of the same software. So if one goes down, everything comes up. Those engineers are obsessed about resiliency, about neutrality, and about performance. And so that sounds maybe a little bit scary at first. Say, I'm going to build on something that there is no one I can call. There's no a direct SLA. There's not a president of Ethereum. But you actually rely on a whole community that's been proven for 10 years able to deliver that performance. And so that would be my 2 cents for public chain that of course I advocate. And to rebound on what Daniela said, there is also some solution that can be offered to whatever needs you're gonna have. Some L2s that can offer some semi-private chain while also connecting directly with the liquidity of Ethereum. So in a nutshell, everything is possible. I think if you wanna make more money, because you're here for that, we're here to make business, having access to the liquidity of Ethereum and a public network is where you're gonna have the biggest opportunity.
Yeah, it's a network. I mean, is there a president of the internet?
Yay.
Maybe there's someone who thinks that. I guess if I think about our journey over 10 years, we spent the first 3 years advising our clients to build on private Ethereum. And the reason we did that was because we thought, well, at this stage, we can use Ethereum as a sandbox, a private environment where you can have controls and everything that you need. But be ready because maybe you want to connect and interoperate and integrate later and move into a more public-facing environment. And that's really how things have played out. And we won't get technical here, but we did mention layer 2s. And I think layer 2s are an interesting way to kind of start to merge those things, have a bit of both ways. Tony, do you want to talk to us a little bit about use cases?
Well, I just like to slightly reframe what the choice is, because we're speaking as if each bank has a choice about which technology to use, public or private. There's a completely different way of thinking about this, which is Ethereum is a place, and your customers are transacting in that place. Solana is a place, and your customers are transacting in that place.
Like a play.
Now, if you as a bank don't show up in that venue, then your customers will use someone else. So if you look into your customers' transactions and they're moving money from your balance sheet into an exchange, that's a big signal to you that you're not servicing your customer. So if your bank doesn't have a stable coin on Ethereum, your customer is using USDC or USDT. If your bank doesn't have a tokenized deposit on Solana, your customer is using someone else's product.
Wow.
These networks are places. And the real choice is, do you want to service your customer where they are? Now, I completely understand your hesitance in occupying these places because the regulators have made them very scary for us to occupy. But it's a must. If your customers are transacting on Ethereum, you have to service them. Just like if your customers are walking down the high street, you put a branch on that high street. The high street is also a scary place, but you put a branch there nonetheless. So it's not about a choice of technology. It's simply a question, do you want to follow your customers where they are or not?
So why are the customers going there?
For the reasons that Daniela mentioned, because they can do stuff on Ethereum they can't do in the real world.
I can give a quick example. Yeah. So, long story short, I have some credit card payment that arrive, and I don't have the cash in my bank. So this morning, I took some ETH that I put in a DeFi protocol, and I borrowed some cash against it at 5% for like the next week. So I can pay my credit card when it's gonna hit. And I can have this for like pretty minimal, like, 6% for like it's like 10K. It's pretty good, no one offering this in my traditional banking. And so that's maybe a little bit of an edge example, but this is what we can do and what people do. So I keep my ETH, somewhere. I get some cash against it. Now it's gonna hit my bank account in probably 2 days because there's still a little bit of RTGS is not completely direct. And that's it. But this is an example of thing I can do, and I don't have any other offer. Or I would have to take, like, I guess, the 30% APR of Chase or something like that.
I mean, Red, when you make an interesting point, it's like, if you were in a completely private space, you don't have access to all this stuff, would you even see that option, right? So I think, Tony, you were making some points, Daniela, you mentioned something. The discussion goes between, are these chains, do you look at them as technology providers? Or do you look at them as marketplaces or places where people can list offerings, right? And I see that debate playing out. If you talk to our technology teams, they think of it as like, networks, traditional messaging systems, kind of where you started, Tony, with. But when I look at our, I'm in business development, I was, running various trading businesses. I look at places where I find liquidity, right? And whether that's liquidity from a source I care, if I want to see my risk. So I think it ultimately goes back to, and when we have conversations with regulators, they're like, who should be the regulator of these chains? I mean, it's to your point, Aldi, like you have a regulator for the internet. So I think it's still early days when people are trying to figure out, like, what is a blockchain network, right? Is it a technology platform? Is it a technology network? Which in case, you don't need regulators, you just need to regulate the entities and make sure they follow some kind of approved framework so that the whole system's not a wild, wild west. But if you're talking about them as being marketplaces, right, which you started alluding to, and I think Red one for your example, that's what's happened, right? Then it starts to take a very different meaning, right? And then you start thinking about the fact that can you run marketplaces which are completely over the counter, which is a little bit like somebody standing on a high street saying, I have this to sell, I don't care who shows up, right? That's where I think you start really getting the debate about, how do those things operate? So I think it's still early days, and I don't know, Danielle, if you have the view or not, because you've seen the space evolve. I don't know whether people have still made up their mind about what a network, what is the primary utility? There's a concept of what you're doing there versus how you're doing it. The technology people are looking at more from the how end. The business people are looking at it more from the what end.
So Biz, your institution has published a report, Stablecoin 2030, which is a fantastic report. If people haven't seen it yet, it really goes into a lot of depth on this. Do you want to give us a bit of a perspective on how you see things playing out?
So I think from our vantage point and the report, the stablecoin report as you published in 2030 is from our kind of independent research side, we've all contributed to it. I think what it starts exploring and the fact that, when you see the growth of privately issued coins and money, right? They existed, right? Privately issued money in the US was like over 100 years old. But now you're starting to see it happen in the digital system where it's available a lot more publicly. You're starting to see regulatory frameworks emerge that dictate money's about safety and soundness, right? Trust. Money's also about interoperability. Money works best when it's fungible, right? You can move from one form to the other. Today, you use your card, you get a check, you issue a wire, you settle it through ACH. Money works best when it's interoperable. So you start taking private forms of money, and you got to keep them in narrow corridors, you start hitting dead ends, right? So the way we are looking at the ecosystem is we think about money, and as privately issued money, coins maybe, as another form of payment instrument, another form of transferring liquidity of value. So we certainly see, if we bring that report, that there is opportunities for both, which will come both from comfort, safety, risk. When you don't want any kind of an instrument where there's a run-on, because people fear the safety or the integrity of it. So that's kind of how our report kind of explores how this can evolve and get integrated with the ecosystem. People start, to your point, when you were making earlier, we kind of start seeing it as if you're not there and your client's commercial model dictates you to be there, then you as a financial services provider are leaving your client high and dry, and you're leaving economic and business opportunities on the table.
Wait, very good.
Can I add there? Because I think, we've all, many familiar faces in the room today, we've all been waiting for the killer use case, right? And stablecoins is certainly one of them, I think, and that's really important. The other piece is interoperability, right? The advances that the community as a whole in between different chains, interoperability is becoming more and more critical. We can do these things because the networks are wider and more diverse. There's not going to be one blockchain to rule them all. Sorry. But there's going to be certainly winners and losers, and there's going to be a need for optionality, and that's what the enterprise wants. And had you asked me 10 years ago, would the industry be where it is today? I would say no way, because enterprises don't move that fast. But the thing is, this is more of a B2C movement, right? The retail is pushing the market forward, and the banks are coming along with it as well. So I think the conversions of the public and the private are due to enhancements in interoperability. The second piece is privacy technology. So if you look at zero knowledge proofs and other types of confidential computing, things that are really nascent still in the market. And Adi, you guys have been at this for a while, but they're really nascent and are going to take a while to germinate, to get more people involved, more developers, more regulators. One of the things that I'm so super proud of at Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust and the Linux Foundation as a whole is that we've been able to bring the regulators in. We just announced our 9th central bank that joined the foundation, the German central bank, Bundesbank, to bring their engineers to the table so that they can sit around and talk to the builders and the developers about what their needs are and how they're going to build it out. So I think, the pace of the industry is moving really fast. I say this all the time. Sometimes it's scary of how fast things move. But I think if you have the regulators, if you have the builders, and you have the academic innovators at the table, we're all going to get there in a safe, compliant way that is going to follow what the consumers want, right? Bringing the consumers along so that you don't lose them to ecosystems that are not part of the banking industry.
We got red one. Is there going to be one blockchain to rule them all?
I don't know. I don't know. What I know is right now, 60% of all stable coins are on Ethereum. 85% of the DeFi activity is also on Ethereum. But that's all for now. I would say I really want to second what you said, Daniela, about bringing people in the room. And I think that definitely a switch in the behavior and the posture, even within the Ethereum ecosystem, where you have now really teams that are dedicated to come and talk and listen to what are your needs. What can we do to help you coming on board? And this has been like a very strong shift in a way, like a very more traditional engineering community was behaving. And you can see like leadership at Ethereum Foundation talking about like one of their 3 big roadmap for this year is really integrating the enterprise needs, improving the performance, improving the user experience. Those are the words. Paul Brody and Josh Stark were on stage at Consensus a couple of months ago saying this. So that's really a difference from like what you could see like even a year or 2 years ago. We have now even like there is a team dedicated to talk to enterprise within the Ethereum Foundation that never existed. So we're really seeing that shift in having a conversation with different market participants to understand what are your needs and how we can work together. At the end, we cover like so complex a big sensor and censorship.
Red one, it sounds like the Grammys when your thank you speech has gone long enough and the music starts coming on.
Thank you, supporty guy. But so, like to conclude, like really, like we've saw like the team in Ethereum community are doing incredible work in terms of cryptography and networking. Any problems faced in enterprise, we sit together, we'll listen to it in a good format for you to be able to express yourself safely, because we're not like we'll open source GitHub and we're gonna find some solution. That's my message. That's gonna be like just some work together and we'll find some solution.
Tony, this is the first hour of the conference. All right, as people head into the next 4 days, what should they be thinking about?
Okay, I've been thinking about what's the most controversial and provocative thing I could possibly say in the first session of Sibos. What is it? The bank account is dead.
Yes.
Why? A bank account is a window into a private database. You have your ledger. You give customers read and write access in a sense to that private ledger through the bank account. If we really are moving to a world of tokens, then you will have tokenized deposits and stable coins from regulated issuers and tokenized money market funds. And these tokens will live on many chains, and the customer will interact with a wallet. And that wallet is more powerful and more general purpose than the bank account. So the era that we're entering into is one of tokens and chains and wallets. And the competition is going to move from who has the bank account to who has the wallet. So, most controversial statement ever heard at Sibos, the bank account is dead.
On that note,
Discuss.
on that note, we'll just let it resonate. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Eddie.
Yeah.